Good evening, everyone. So this evening, we're looking at solving quadratic equations. Now, there are several ways to solve a quadratic equation. One will be by factorizing, right? Is where you factorize. If it is that you have trouble with factorization, please visit my last video on factorization. The second one would be by using the quadratic formula. The third is by completing the square. And the fourth, using graphs. Now, we already completed factorization. So before I do this question, I'm going to just look at one where, so today's class, we'll make sure and get through solving factorization, solving quadratics by factorization, and by the quadratic formula. So let's get a quadratic. Now, it's important to note that when it comes to quadratics, a quadratic is always in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c can be any number, positive or negative. And x could be any letter, right? The x could be any letter. It doesn't always have to be x. It could be p, it could be t, it could be any letter. Now, the first step that you must do is be able, in your quadratic, to identify what is x, what is a, what is b, and what is c. So let's say they gave us this one. Now, they may ask you to factorize. If they come out and they tell you to factorize a quadratic equation, it means that they want you to factorize it. However, anytime they say solve, it means that they want the value of it. So when you're solving a quadratic, you usually see that it's equal to 0. If it's not equal to 0, right? If it's not equal to 0, whatever is the number on this side, you bring it across on this side and you simplify it so that the right-hand side will be equal to 0, right? So if you have this part of the quadratic equal to some other number, you bring across the number, once you cross the equal sign, you do the opposite operation. And once you do that, you ensure that only 0 is on the right-hand side. All right. So identify what is your A, B, and C. So the first one we're going to do is we're going to factorize and then solve. So you identify what is what. A is the value in front of x squared. There's no number in front of x squared, So we recognize that it is 1. So A is 1. B is the number in front of X. In this case, it's positive 6. C is a number without a letter or constant. So in this case, C is 8. In solving a quadratic by a factorization, we know you multiply the value of C by the value of A. So in this case, when I multiply them, 8 times 1 would be 8. Following the rules, remember if it is that you are unsure or you forgot about factorization, you could go back to the last recording on factorization. You have to find two numbers that when we multiply them will give me 8, and when added or subtracted will give me the number in front of X, which is B. So we take the number that we got when we multiply. The rule is you look for all the ways we could multiply to get that number. So we have 1 times 8 and 2 times 4. So you look to see which of the pairs of numbers, when I add them or subtract them, will give me 6. So look at the first pair. I have 1 and 8. If I add them, I'll get 9. If I minus them, I'll get 7. So it's not that. 4 and 2. When I add them, I'll get 6. Ting, ting, ting. So that's the pair of numbers that I want. So in your quadratic, when you're factorizing, my first term stays the same. My last term stays the same, sign and everything. And then we use that to expand the middle. Right? So it doesn't matter the order, but the two numbers which satisfy the condition of when you multiply the two of them, you get the number here. And when you add them or subtract them, depending on the signs, we got this one. You're going to use those two numbers to expand the middle term. So 6x would now become 2x plus 4x. 2 mangoes plus 4 mangoes are 6 mangoes. Right? So you basically use those two numbers to make 4 terms of the 3 terms of the quadratic. We then factorize by grouping. X is in common, so we pull out the x, divide each term by x. So the remainder goes inside, x plus 2. Copy what's in your brackets and paste. Remember, if you're watching the recording, write down the steps. Write down the steps either in your book or on your flashcards and have it with you and practice until you get it. Ask yourself, what would I multiply by out here to give me what's in the last pair of terms, which is these two here? So I have x and I want to get 4x. In order to multiply that, 4 when multiplied by x will give me the 4x. 4 multiplied by 2 will give me the positive 8. So we're going to factorize again. We're going to factor out the x plus 2. Or in layman terms or ordinary terms, we pull out the common bracket And everything else that is not inside the brackets, we put it together in the other. So if they ask us to factorize it alone, this is what we'll get. But they asked us to solve the quadratic. So what we do is we put it equal to 0. Now, in solving a quadratic, after you factorize, let's go back to our fact. Anytime you're multiplying two numbers and your solution is 0, it means either this number is 0 to give me 0, or this one is 0 to give me 0. Right? So it's either or. So that means it's either this will be equal to 0, or this will be equal to 0. In a quadratic, you always have two solutions for x, right? So we end up with two answers for x. So when we get to this point, each of the brackets, you put it equal to 0. So we say x plus 2 equals to 0, or x plus 4 is equal to 0. So you work both of that. Remember, you carry across. Once you cross the equal sign, you do the opposite operation. So this was adding. So when it goes across, it becomes minus 2. Or carry this across. It was adding. So when it goes across, it becomes minus 4. Right? So our solutions here would be x is minus 2 or x is minus 4. So if they ask you to factorize and then solve, this is how you'll solve the quadratic. Now, it's important to note that not all quadratics can be factorized, right? Not all quadratics can be factorized. So you see at this point, if it is that you find yourself having too much trouble to get two numbers to expand the middle term, maybe it cannot be factorized, right? Now, at the CSEC level, I've realized that they will guide you as to how to solve it, right? So normally they will tell you to factorize it, and then they may tell you to solve it after. Or they will tell you, use completing the square. Or they may give you it to solve the graph, or plot the graph, I should say. Or they may tell you, using the formula. However, if you have challenges finding the two numbers to expand it, then it means that we have to use the formula. Now I'm going to use the formula on this side. Right, so I'm going to solve the same equation, but this time using the quadratic formula. All right, so let's solve the same quadratic, which is x squared plus 6x plus 8 is equal to 0, but this time using the quadratic. So remember, a from the same quadratic, a was 1, b was 6, and c was 8. So you get the values of a, b, and c from the quadratic equation itself. In order to solve it using the quadratic formula, we are basically going to substitute it into this. A lot of students, their downfall is with this negative b. But remember, it is negative of whatever is the value of b. So in this case, b is 6. What that means is that if it was the case that b was negative 6, then it will be negative of negative 6, which becomes positive 6, right? But that's only if b was negative. But in this case, b is not negative, so it will just be negative 6. Plus or minus the square root of b squared, b is 6. Remember, it's positive. So to be positive 6 squared minus 4, all I'm doing is substituting. So wherever I see a, I'll put 1, use brackets to make it easier to see. And wherever I see c, I'll put 8. Brackets in mathematics mean to multiply. All divided by 2a. A is 1. So let's simplify this. So negative 6 plus or minus the square root. Let's simplify what's in here. That's 6 squared. 6 sixes are 36. Minus 4 times 1 is 4. And 4 times 8, that's 32. All over 2 ones are 2. Treat your square root as though it's like a bracket. So you have to do this, what is in the square root first. Right? So treat the square root the same way you would have done brackets, where you work that first. So we'll have x is equal to minus 6 plus or minus 36 minus 32 is 4. So it will be the square root of 4. All divided by 2. Now, the square root of 4 is 2. So I'm changing colors so you see the difference. So that means x is equal to negative 6 plus or minus 2, all divided by 2. Now, remember, quadratic gives you 2 solutions. So it means that we have to work this separately. Right? So it's either x is equal to negative 6 plus 2 divided by 2, or x is equal to negative 6 minus 2, right? So this is where we have the plus or the minus. So the first part, we're going to add it, so it will be negative 6. add 2. The second one, we're going to minus it. Negative 6 minus 2, all divided by 2. And you solve each of them separately. I'm solving it on this side here because I don't have a lot of space there. So minus 6 plus 2 divided by 2. That will be minus 6 plus 2. When you have two different signs, we subtract like normal and keep the sign of the bigger. So 6 minus 2 is 4. Minus 4 divided by 2 will be divide like normal. 4 divided by 2 is 2. But because one is negative and one is positive, my answer will be negative 2. Or the other one, x is equal to minus 6 minus 2 divided by 2. When we have two same signs, we add and keep the sign. So that will be negative 8 over 2. Negative 8 divided by 2 would be negative 4. So we saw our two answers. X is negative 2, which we also got when we factorize. And x is negative 4, which we also got when we factorize. All right, so let's try this one. It's taken from the May 2024 paper 2. Now they actually came out and told us using the quadratic formula. So we have x squared minus 60x plus 225. If they tell you use the quadratic formula, use the quadratic formula, right? If they tell you factorize, you solve it by factorizing. If they just tell you solve, it doesn't matter. All right, so formula, you write your formula. Minus b plus or minus the square roots of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Right, so x is equal to that. Make sure that you recognize what is a, what is b, what is c. A is a number in front of x squared. There's no number, so we understand it's 1. B is a number in front of 60. Remember, numbers have sign. So B is actually negative 60. C is a number by itself, the constant. So C is 225. Let's substitute it into the formula. So the first part is negative b. So that means it's negative and b is negative 60. Right? So it becomes negative b. B is negative. So it's going to be negative of negative 60. A lot of students, they have trouble with this part and it throws them on. So remember, b is negative 60. So the negative of b will be negative 60. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. B is negative 60. Minus 4, a is 1, c is 225 all over 2a. And a is 1. So You simplify any brackets under the square root, right? So negative of negative, anytime you have two same signs back to back, it becomes positive. So that becomes positive 60. Use a calculator all the way. Negative 60 squared, negative 60 times negative 60. You multiply, but you have two same signs. So your answer is positive. I'm using my calculator. You could too and check over with me. I got positive 3,600 minus, remember, BODMAS says multiply before we add or subtract. So 4 times 1 is 4, and then 4 times 225, I got 900 all over 2. Then 60 plus or minus, we could work out 3,600 minus 900. I got 2,700. Use a calculator to find out what is the square root of 2,700. Right, so when I found the square root, I got 51.96. Right, so I rounded it off to 2 decimal places. Then we're going to break this up. We'll have 60. So x is 60 plus or minus 51.96 divided by 2. So we separate it. So we'll have 60 plus 51.96 all divided by 2, or 60 minus 51.96 divided by 2. So we separate them, we solve them individually using your calculator. All right, so I'm just using my calculator. $60 plus 51.96, then divided by 2. I got here 55.98, and I could round it off to 56, or 60 minus 51.96. And I got and I rounded it off to access 4. Right, so let's pause here.